In this episode, I want to share with you, if you want, from an emotional point of view, my experience with the fall of communist dictatorship regime. If you did follow my other videos about the subject that happened in Romania, so we are talking here about 1989, December 1989, and I was a teenager back then, and I did participate. I did not get shot. I was in danger of get shot at that point, but I did participate in those events because I was in the main city in Romania, in capital Bucharest, which happened to be where the not the main events happened, but perhaps the main events happened where the dictator Ceausescu and his wife did run with a helicopter in December 22, 1989. Again, I'm not sure if I did mention I was a teenager back then, and so I want to just to tell you what I did those days, but also the emotions back then, because that was completely it's a unique experience. So it was new for me, but it's also unique, and I think it was unique for many persons because of the simple fact that actually I have been born in that dictatorship, and by the time when this dictatorship did fall, majority of the people which have been on the streets have been born in the dictatorship. That means is simple that they had no idea about what freedom means throughout their entire life, which is you get is was technically just like being born in a prison, and all of a sudden someone is opening the door and say, "Have a nice day." Anyhow, all this to say that I just want to kind of get you a context about this. First. We had very little information about the outside world. So there were no TV programs that was talking about what was happening in the other countries, in the communist part of Europe. There was basically the only place where you could get some information other than from the neighbors, which were just heard something from someone else, was a radio station which was emitting on short waves from Germany, I think. So we could catch these radio programs very faintly, difficult with interruptions or so. And it was in Romanian. It was Romanian people who were emitting back from the middle of the Europe, and we could hear some information from there. So we knew what was happening in the rest of the country, but also in the rest of the Europe. We knew that the communist countries were the communist regimes in the other countries were falling, were changing to capitalism and so on. There were peaceful revolts. Actually, I don't think there was any bloody revolt other than perhaps some a bit in Russia as well, Romania and Russia. So Russia was much more peaceful than Romania. Romania has been the worst place for some reason, which is still a mystery today. Or a mystery, depends on what you believe. So all this to say that we knew that the communist countries were turning, the dictatorships were falling around us, but nothing in Romania, nothing was happening. And I want to say something that I was in Bucharest. If you look at the map, Bucharest is towards kind of east south place in Romania. It's closer to Bulgaria, actually, if you look to the neighbor countries. However, who were living in Romania in the western part of the country were closer to the ex-Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia was more free, and those people were getting radio and even TV stations from Yugoslavia, and they were better informed. But in Bucharest, it was difficult to get this information, and the information didn't travel easily between the cities unless you knew someone. And also, people were too scared to talk such subjects because they were scared they were being listened by the political police. All this to say that there have been a few events, if you want. First, there have been actually all this, by the way, was organized. All this, the fall of the regime has been organized, especially from outside, but also with some. I don't know how to call this collaboration from inside. So there have been people who even the top of the army, a general, even actually the chief of the political police, the security police, did betray the dictator. So everything was infiltrated long in advance, not just months, but years in advance from outside. I'm not getting into these details, but that's why the regime did fall. Actually, was a overthrown coup d'état, if you want. But it was a coup d'état, and they actually did use the population. Maybe I'll explain how to kind of make it appear like a revolution, a revolt, but it was actually a coup d'état. I was saying that actually there have been um, someone tried in one city to do something, kind of a revolt. It didn't work. They got arrested. This is just days before. And then in another city in Timișoara is western side of Romania, which is closer to Yugoslavia. There have been a revolt. We did hear about it at the radio, and also we did hear that there have been people shot. And just to say something that I, at least me, just without having much information, I instinctively knew that if we were to go in the street, there is a good chance that people were going to be shot. Why? Because the meaning the by judging how rough the regime was, Ceausescu, the political police, even the militia, which is equivalent of police, were really political and very mean people. So we knew the response to any kind of revolt is going to be, uh, at least my feeling was, I was sure is going to be deadly, right? Deadly, right? So even if it wasn't someone to be killed, if they would capture you, God have mercy on you. The beating and the years in prison that you have got was just better to get shot, basically. So all this to say that I think everybody knew this, and when the revolt started in Timișoara, I think for 1 or 2 days, there is details about this. They got nobody fired, but the third day or so, they started to shoot at people. There have been about 100 people killed, regular persons, right? Even children got killed because the people in Timișoara were less afraid than the people in Bucharest to get on the street, were just more courageous, and they brought their children and children have been shot, killed and wounded. So there have been about 100 people killed and 300 or so wounded by gunshots, right? And by gunshot, it's mostly war gunshot like AK-47. I think that's what the army was using. So these were really bad shots, not just small handgun shots, like from self-defense guns or so. It's really bad wounds. So there have been these people killed back in I think it started 17th of December, 17th, 18th, and perhaps even in the 19th of December. And hear details about this at the radio in Bucharest. The Bucharest was quiet back then. However, these details, obviously, because the Western world wanted to topple the Ceausescu, to take it down, the news were that there were tens of thousands of killed or so. That was much exaggerated. That was part of the plan of overthrown coup d'etat. Like maybe exaggerations, but we were aware. And then Ceausescu did a big mistake. Big mistake. I mean, he was a very smart guy, by the way, but at some point you kind of lose track of things, and he did a big mistake on the 21st. So by 20 or 21st December, Timișoara was already occupied by the protesters. The police militias just left and just gave up, basically, but also kind of betrayed, if you want, the dictator. But Timișoara was a city that we didn't know, but people were on the streets for the entire days, no longer going to work, and the city was kind of, we call it, liberated by then. We didn't know about it in Bucharest. So in 21st of December, Ceausescu had, actually, it wasn't his idea. I think it was someone in the in his close persons who got this idea. Let's do a meeting, like a big meeting, in 21st December in Bucharest, the middle of the city, so as to have the people at the meeting kind of show the support for the dictatorship. I don't have um, to tell you that basically it's this very meeting. Supposedly, obviously, the people there was people were forced to go to this meeting, so is this very meeting that those infiltrated persons who were looking to overthrow Ceausescu, they did use this meeting, they break this meeting, and they scared the people, and the people started to protest against Ceausescu from this very meeting. So basically, he did it with his own very hands. So he did a big mistake making this meeting. And you also get the images from this meeting. Usually it's in Romanian, but just type 21st December 1889, Bucharest Ceausescu meeting, MITING, and this was live television, and you can tell actually there is this moment when the crowd, you can tell everybody is like alive, like very very obedient, with red flags with the image of the dictator in hand. Everybody has to stay like this for many hours. But when the meter was disturbed, if you want, you can tell the camera is filming this, and was a very very intense moment. And I did watch this moment live in television myself, and I was shocked. I was like, what's happening? In the sense of, I didn't expect any kind of revolt to happen in Bucharest in any moment. And I was like, what is going on? And actually, because this was live television, people in Bucharest, they say, many people in Bucharest at that point, they just understood that something was happening in the center of the city. So basically, they left their homes and they went into the center of the city to participate to the revolt. Um, Also, there was a big part of the people from the meeting to support the dictator, who kind of went to a side street, actually right in the middle of the city, and they started to protest again. So there are images, if you want, for these protesters. 21st, this was in the afternoon, and this was December was very mild that December, so you could tell the people it wasn't really cold at all, as really nice days. So the people actually went in the middle of the city, in front of basically more or less the only hotel that was hosting international visitors, and they were protesting right in front of this hotel because they were thinking, if the foreign persons are seeing us from the balconies, from the windows, nobody's going to try to shut us, to kill us, right? So the world will find out. That's why, and you can tell, you can look on YouTube, for instance. This hotel, it's called it Intercontinental. So try to type like this, more or less. It's in Romanian, Intercontinental, 21st, just type 21st December. Actually, it's Decembrie. I'm not sure how you want to type it. Maybe if I don't forget, I put it. Maybe I put your links in the comment section so you get an idea, because these protests were filmed by those foreign persons. They have video cameras, so all this was filmed. And so I wasn't there at that moment. My brother actually went there, and in the evening, so when the dark came, when the day started to turn into night, the police started to arrive at that place. Not just the police, but all the repressive, there are several types of repressive groups and so on. And by at around 10 p.m. or so, the protesters did kind of brought several vehicles of all kinds, private trucks and so on. What they found in the center, they kind of tossed them, put and make a barricade. And this is another video. If you search barricade, Inter barricade, 21st December 1989. So they did put fire to this barricade, and this lasted from around 10 p.m. to around 1 a.m. the next day, 1, 2. For this later 3-4 hours of protests, there were less persons in there, a couple of hundreds. There are also this has been videotaped, video cams, right, back then from one of the buildings by that place, and there was already the army was there, and they had this. I'm not sure about the names. Tanks. They also had tanks, but they also had this kind of transporters which had machine guns, like big machine guns, just like on tanks, and they started to fire shots with those machine guns, heavy ones, like this is military, but first in the air, not in the protesters. But they spent like 1 or 2 million fires like these shots. So they kept shot, and I guess that the noise was crazy back then. And at around 1 a.m. Basically the next day, again we are at nighttime here. They started to shoot directly into the crowd. They didn't kill many people that night. About there were 50%, 49, I think, were killed, and I guess 200 or so wounded by gunshots of all kinds. So this was kind of the place was cleared by the police and the army and everybody that was there by around 2 a.m. the next day, and by the next hours of the night they just cleaned the place. They removed all the debris and the every vehicle that was burned, and so they did also arrest a lot of people, and they beat the people that got arrested really badly, like with the back of the weapons. So it was really brutal. My God, those who have been beaten then, just terrible. And we knew all this because, again, really sad that those oppressive organizations, if you want, security forces, the police, the even the army, were really nasty people, really nasty. And that's one of the things that I remember from that regime, how mean those people could be. Scary. Anyhow, so many people, about 700, got arrested, and by the morning, everything was clear there, just like nothing happened. People started to kind of, there were people going to, I'm not sure, perhaps it was a Saturday morning, I'm not sure about the time. Um, and what happens is that those who did prepare the overthrow, they actually did organize people to come from the factories, and that was one of the this is actually there have been many talks about this, but this is something that was clearly organized, and there have been columns of people, like hundreds of or maybe even thousands of people coming from several points. The factories in Bucharest were around the city, right? Not in the center. So there have been many columns that did advance towards the center of the city. Nobody did stop them, and they were protesting and saying down with Ceausescu, freedom, and so on. These columns of people did pack right, I believe, exactly at the place where the previous day was that supportive meeting imposed, was forcefully supporting, right at the same place. And basically that place was it's a big plaza, and this plaza is also where the central committee of the Communist Party was located, a big building, and that's where basically the Ceausescu was spending his day. That was his working place and the place for many of the nomenclature, the party people that were working every day. So it's a big building. So there have been like 200,000 people packing, protesters packing right in front of that building in that plaza, and Ceausescu was inside the building. And then there's a whole history that he kind of was helped to escape through the roof of the building through a helicopter. He was with his wife, I believe, two top communist persons, two bodyguards and two pilots, and the heli was fully loaded, and it did took off, but it was kind of difficult take off, and they lifted and they moved to a further away home that he had near Bucharest. And then basically, I'm just telling you the story, then I'll tell you my experience. Basically, from that home, he took again the helicopter, and the pilot may have been in the coup in the overthrown plan, because the pilot told to Ceausescu that someone wants to shut us down with a rocket or something, and basically Ceausescu ordered him to just put down the helicopter by a road someplace inside Romania, and they stepped out of the helicopter. He was with his wife and two bodyguards, and basically he stopped. So this is the big dictator, right? You need to understand the I don't know, it's pretty much the same in all dictatorships, but a dictator for the regular person is really like it's something that's it's surhuman, right? It's like something untouchable, and it's such an image that you create about himself that uh, so it's still a human being, but it's really really like like an emperor or something. And he basically had to stop a regular citizen that was just happened to travel with his car through that road. So there's this guy, actually he was a doctor, the citizen, this guy, Ceausescu, his wife, and two bodyguards. And those bodyguards were angels for by any standards. So they stopped this guy and they sat all of them, right? So there's five people, five places in that car, and they Ceausescu ordered that guy to drive him to, I don't exactly remember exactly where, but at some point. So you need to understand that the population was hating him like badly. If he didn't take over with the helicopter from the Central Committee roof, if he was trapped, caught by the 200,000 people there, we will never ever retrieve his body for sure. So everybody was hating him badly. Although now, if you look at comments on Romanian medias, social medias, so even YouTube and so, you will find a lot of people who regret him. But that's a completely different story. It's just another subject. I don't want to get into it. Don't have too much time now. So at that time, he traveled with that private car, and it seems that at some point they got through a small city where there were protesting people, and they saw him in the car, the people on the street, and they wanted to stop the car, but they couldn't. Another car tried to follow this car where he was taking place, and the second car kind of started to hit the car where Ceausescu was taking place, and well, it turns out the second car actually got a broken radiator, had to stop. So it was like really, you could totally make a movie about this. And imagine those, Ceausescu was old by then, so I think somewhere around 75 old. Person, and with his wife, so the entire country wants to trap them, right? Wants to catch them, and they're running in the private car with some random person. All this to say that again they got caught by actually two policemen, and they brought them into a military basis, a military place for the army, basically. And they kept them for 3 days in there, inside a transporter, because they were afraid someone is going to come to rescue them. And the third day, they got kind of judgment to 40-45 minutes. Again, the accusation were much exaggerated. They've been accused to have killed 60,000 people at that revolt, which was much higher than the actual numbers. There's about, I don't know the exact numbers that were killed, but maybe no more than a few hundred people. Anyhow, not saying they were good persons, but so there have been lots of really bad accusations, and they got shot, both of them. Perhaps you can tell, there are videos on YouTube. Both of them, his wife, got just put to a wall and just shot by four soldiers, I think, with machine guns. Then they got buried the same day. This was in 25th December 1989. Um, yeah, that was pretty much the overthrow. And then unfortunately, um, we had this, there have been kind of people that kept shooting inside the prisons. It's still kind of a mystery today who was still keep shooting the population. The army was had a side with the population, but there have been also about perhaps 800, 700 people who had been shot after Ceausescu did run away. Between the day he ran away and the day when he shot, there have been many hundred people killed inside Romania. There was kind of street fights, so very rare, because nobody has been accused. Nobody they anyhow. That's a complete story. All this to say that this is about the story, the events that happened now in the 21st 22nd. So I told you that 21st December I did watch that live television when all of a sudden in the middle of that supporting meeting for Ceausescu, basically there have been a couple of people who detonated something inside the crowd. Also it seems there a couple of people were prepared with kind of sticks with nails, and they kind of um, punch a couple of females in the meeting, punch them in the butt. So basically, the females started to scream. People got scared. So this is what kind of teared apart the meeting, the communist supporting meeting, right? So people got scared and start running away. Also, there have been a sound that has been put to speakers, very powerful speakers, a special sound. Perhaps you've seen in, I believe in Belarus, they did use this sound. It's like it's a special sound. It's a special sound. I don't have the name, but it's something that causes people really very powerful anxiety and stress and distress, actually fear, sudden fears. They use a couple of techniques to break that meeting and turn everybody from support, not from like showing support Ceausescu, because everybody was hating him, obviously. So from everybody showing support to Ceausescu to starting to protest against him. Right? So that's how it started in 21st December in Bucharest. So I was saying that I did see these things on live television. My brother went to participate at those protests where people have been shot. He escaped. He didn't. He has been wounded or arrested. I actually wanted to go as well, but I was younger than him. So and also I asked my mother, "Can I just go on the street and just?" We were kind of far from the city center, but I just wanted to be on the street to maybe see if everybody is talking about what's happening in the center of the city. And my mother made me promise I won't go in the center of the city. I said yes, and I did. Actually, I went downstairs in these block apartments, and people were sitting on the sidewalks. This was already nighttime, and I did moved towards the center of the city and didn't really respect my promise. I did move a couple of 100 meters, and at one point there was this big column of protesters who was coming from a factory and moving towards the center of the center. So this is 21st December. This is exactly the same thing that happened on the morning of the 22nd December when the Ceausescu did run away. So did run away, right? That's the word. So in the 21st, at the night, I did see this column of people, and I can tell you when I saw the column of people, they were kind of screaming something against Ceausescu. I felt I had this feeling of death, because we knew is not going to be nice in any ways. They are going to kill people there. So when I saw this column, I had this feeling. So this was completely new feeling for me. I had no idea what it is. Obviously, nobody had told me about this feeling, but I felt death when I saw these people going to the city center. Maybe some of them have been killed later on, but I knew if I would go there, there would be death there. So So I didn't actually. I was perhaps looking. I was hesitating. Though I go with those people column, and at one point, there were people standing on the sidewalks, watching those people protesting and moving towards the city center. And someone told me, I was again, I was a teenager at that point, and an adult told me, what are you doing here? Just go back home right now." And I think that was um, what's called political police guy, actually, because there were many of this among the population in civil clothes, right? Not so that guy scared me, so I went back home. Uh, Later in the night, my brother came back home. He told me about he was has been at a place in the city center where several people have been shot. He kind of told me how there were a girl had been shot. Anyhow, those are things. Um, and The next day, 22nd December, I got a call from my aunt. She was living not far away from me, and she told me, "Come by my place." Okay, I went by her place, and she told me, "Let's go towards the city center." I don't know how she knew, but let's go towards the city center. So this is the 22nd. This is the day where Ceausescu did fly away with the helicopter in the morning, 22nd. And we went on the street, and we saw one of those columns that were advancing. So this is the next day morning, right? The first people who got killed was the previous night, and now it's the next day morning. Ceausescu was still in power. And so we see this big column of people walking towards the city center. And again, at this moment, we need to understand it was full dictatorship for everyone. So the fear, the state of dictatorship was the same. Nothing had changed. We knew something happened on the previous night in the center. We didn't know what was the outcome of that, but we were still in full dictatorship. So we see this column, and my aunt, she was older than me, obviously, told me, "Let's join them." And I say, "Oh, okay." So I stepped into the column. So there were a lot of people watching from the sides. The sidewalk. The column was actually walking in the middle of the street, and there was a big column. I mean, there was hundreds of people, a long column too, and they had no signs or so. They were just screaming and telling, protesting. And I stepped into this column. And so this is basically the second when I maybe you can tell this, I started to um, fight or protest against a dictatorship. Imagine, I was young, like I was a teenager. This is completely new for me. And I just need to point something else out, that to all my teenage childhood, right? Because a child doesn't really think, but at some age, from 10, 12 years old, I always had this kind of urge to kind of, I wish someone would step on the middle of the street and just scream something against Ceausescu, scream down with Ceausescu, scream something about communists, against communists. So I think everybody wanted to do something, but obviously everybody was too afraid to try anything by himself. So, but this kind of this urge, this hunger of protesting against Ceausescu and the whole communist thing, that was really born in us. That was really natural to us, obviously. I don't know if I did talk about this. There have been a few people who actually did more or less openly protest against Ceausescu, and none of them did it well. But anyway, all this to say that we were really afraid. So that's when I stepped into this column with my aunt, and that's the first time when I started to scream down Ceausescu. So this was, I don't remember exactly if there was a fear at that moment. We were walking towards the center of the city, and it was daylight, right? So it was, I would estimate, about 10 a.m. or so. I don't remember if there was fear. I was feeling fear, but I did feel um, Probably there was some sort of fear, but there was sort of apprehension, something's really uncomfortable. And I do remember there were people on the sidewalks watching us. They didn't had the courage to join us. So there was still really a big separation between those who still wanted to stay safe and the ones that were talking and walking, if you want. And we were asked those on the sidewalks from the sidewalks to join us. We were hearing actually kind of, I think it's that slogans like when you say down this, but also kind of sometimes it's a rhyme, right? So say some couple of an expression that kind of has a rhyme to it. So we're screaming these things and watching and just inviting those from the sides to step in. And we kept walking like this, maybe, I don't know, 1 hour. Bucharest is not that big city. So at some point we started to arrive towards the city center, and in the city center, I told you, there were at some point happened to be about 200,000 people. So it was big amount of people, and there have been actually several of such columns walking towards that point. So it was actually all organized by infiltrated people from actually with the Western countries support. But we didn't know about it. Absolutely not. So it's really important now to understand that we had majority of people, regular citizens, have zero idea that something was being prepared by the foreign countries, by the Western countries, including Russia, actually, because Gorbachev did push, did support this overthrow. Probably he was the most important person who did support it. But we had no idea that there was some sort of exterior support or anything like this. We just were protesting. We knew what we were seeing with our own eyes, what was happening in the street. So this walk towards the city center may have been some fear, but mostly was something uncomfortable, and was something very intense, emotionally very intense. The whole point that what you have wished the whole life to say against the dictator, and now it's happening. You say it really. That was something very special, and I did arrive with my aunt at that place where at the big plaza where everybody was packing. And again, if you notice earlier in the video, I did say that at that very place there was this Central Communist Committee building where Ceausescu actually did sleep, did pass the entire night with his wife. I did arrive perhaps about 30 or 1 hour, 30 minutes, 1 hour after he did fly with the helicopter from that building. So I'm arriving where he already left. I didn't know he left because people were just screaming against Ceausescu, but were not passing that information. Perhaps many of them didn't know he left. I don't know. They've seen the helicopter, people who were there, but I don't know if everybody knew he left. Anyhow, I wasn't informed about this. So the place was really crowded with people. And I want to say something else. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So all this has been filmed. There have been video cameras were really very rare in Romania. Just you watch my other videos. Video cameras were pretty expensive back in the days. Depends the professional one, not the ones for private person. But so there have been, I think, 3 cameras or maybe 4 video cameras filming this from different angles. Also did film the helicopter with Ceausescu, but I was saying there are videos about this. If you search for 22nd December revolution in Romania, you will find the images for all this, and can tell the crowd. And I was telling you is really big, and at some point I don't really remember all the moments at that place obviously we were screaming against Ceausescu and so. But at some point, people got into that building, and we could tell people came by. There was a big balcony. Actually, this is the balcony where Ceausescu did his speech on the previous day at the pro-Ceausescu meeting, um, forced pro-Ceausescu meeting. So he did the speech. That building has a balcony, big balcony in front. You can tell from the pictures. And people, when we noticed the protesters arrived inside that balcony and actually came out on that balcony and started throwing books with communist ideology by the balcony, by the windows, we realized that basically, actually, what happened, if I try to remember now, is that we got this idea that we won at that point. At some point in those moments, so I did stay in that plaza, big plaza, for about, I think, 2-3 hours or so in the middle of that crowd. So at some point we got the idea that we won. We got the idea that the regime, the dictatorship has fallen. And I cannot explain how I got this idea because I don't remember all the details, all the moments in the day. But I do remember that at some point in that day, when we when we got the idea that we won, and this is perhaps what's interesting in this video, is that we started feeling a happiness. Actually, there have been two feelings. One is happiness, maybe three feelings: happiness, sort of freedom, and also sort of a very interesting, perhaps can tell, cohesion with everybody else in that plaza. So let's first, this happiness, obviously, it's something that it cannot be really understand, because again, we have been living the entire life, basically most of the people there, which were perhaps 40, 50 years old, most of them have been born in this dictatorship. All of a sudden, this dictatorship, this fear, this hopeless situation, this kind of life where it's not just the restrictions and the things that you lack, but also just the no hope, basically no hope, no future hope whatsoever. All this vanished in a matter of, I don't know, minutes maybe. And all of a sudden, for the very first time in your life, right, you feel freedom, you feel you are free, and you feel like it's all gone. And that feeling, that emotion, was something just is difficult to describe. And actually, I don't think it's possible to describe, and even less possible to understand unless you did live it. Um, and what's interesting also is that later on, back then, we are talking about 89, there was no, at least in Romania, there was no internet whatsoever. The internet was actually only beginning back then. There was no social media of any kind. Social media started later on, but later years, like recent years, if we're considering today, recent years, I did read about other people who have been there, who had the same experience, the same emotional experience that I had. So it wasn't just me. It would feel again like freedom for the first time, something that we didn't even know how it feels. It also felt like I was, and this is precisely the good description, like I was brother with everybody else in that plaza. For some reason, I cannot explain why, it felt like just I was one or together with every single one in that place. This is the first and only time I did feel this thing in my life, obviously. And it's very special feeling. So all this, obviously, we were really happy. And at some point, what happened with me was, I was really my my body was really not that strong back then. I didn't eat that well, so I had this moment of I'm not sure how to call this. I just felt like I was fainting because I was packed in that crowd. I was just, you know, exhausted. And I told my aunt, I just don't feel well physically. I need to go back home. So we went back home, and actually, we went back home walking in the middle of the street. Everybody was walking in the middle of the street, funnily enough, among cars who were speeding, not too fast because those cars weren't that sporty, but everybody was speeding their cars, or at least driving the cars with the headlights on, which again is unlike today when it's automatic. But back then, people would turn the lights only at the night. So this was just a manifestation, if you want. So those who had cars, there weren't many cars, but there were cars though still, and everybody was honking. So it's just honking, driving the cars, lights on, and everybody on foot was walking in the middle of the street. And there is this return at home, if you want, a couple of hours of complete joy. And again, I cannot say it enough. Just touching freedom for the first time in your life, of freedom that you never knew how it feels, right? There are several footage about these moments. However, not all the footage. It's really it's shows clearly that happiness, that joy. You may look at the footage and see, hey, people are happy, but it's not going to look like what I'm describing here. But I can tell you, everybody was inside like this. It's not the Romanians are not um, how to say, they are exteriorized, I think, but pictures. But I did see some moments filmed with where you could tell more that the people were really just not just excited, really, really crazy, like extremely happy. So that was the moment, if you want, the best moment of the day. And that's not just for me, for everybody, because at the fall of the evening, that crowd, the 200,000 people, maybe some went back home at some point, but that big crowd in the middle of the city, um, so we had this, the night came, and the people who basically overthrown Ceausescu took control in the same building, Central Committee Party. Um, they actually were preparing the takeover, the full control of Romania inside the building. But some of them did talk, did had speeches from the balcony, that big balcony, and you have these images as well. And that's 22nd December. And that's 22nd December at night. And as they have speeches, so basically at this point, the army and the political police, Securitate, did, did to, took side. They actually did betray, basically, theoretically, like technically, they took side with the protesters. Um, and other than the 21st December at night, there have been no shots fired in the crowd in the 25th, 22nd of the December day when Ceausescu did run away with the helicopter. The day I was in the street as well, there have been no shots fired. Um, However, when the night, at the beginning of the night, when if you want, the new, the person who took the power basically started to talk at the balcony, at that big balcony, and where the big crowd was in that plaza. They stay in the plaza when at this moment I was home. So there have been these shots who started being fired really by the evening time, 6 p.m. or so. This being winter time, it's already dark by then. So there have been shots being fired into that crowd, small shots at first, but it got more intense at some point. It seems that these shots were being fired from buildings around that plaza, or tall buildings there. And at some point, the army did kind of side with the people, with the crowd, and also there were kind of a couple of tanks in there, and those tanks started to shot, especially the fire guns, not really the shells, but the fire guns on the um, machine guns on the tanks started to shot on the buildings surrounding that plaza into those supposedly persons who were shooting at the crowd, right? So starting with 6, 7, especially 7, 8 p.m., there have been a mess in there in terms of destroying the buildings around that plaza with the machine guns from the tanks, because the buildings were also catching in fire from those machine guns. Obviously, you shoot through the windows and lit something inside. So there's fires, there's lots of shotguns, machine guns, heavy machine guns firing to the buildings. There's still some crowd in there, a couple of hundreds and maybe even thousands of people in the plaza who are kind of trying to protect themselves. At the same time, people speaking from the balcony, but nobody in the balcony had been shot. And that was a big suspicions. Why? Because there is this theory that actually those who shot into the crowd were actually have been hired in advance by those who took over the country, basically, right? So there is this theory there. I'm not saying it's right, but it's just one of the theories who have been those people, because nobody of those people have been ever brought into process, like tried. So yes, so all that night, I don't have a number, but that's the night where have been the most people have been killed during the entire revolt per day. Right? So that day was the deadliest one, and it's really tragic. And again, the next 3, 4 following days, there have been street fights with those invisible. We call them terrorists. Some reason. Um, we don't know yet. There's nothing official, and one of the reasons perhaps is nothing officially um, about those who shot into the crowd and also against the army those days, is that there is a chance that the the government that took over the country after Ceausescu had something to do with those people. There is a theory about this. There's a suspicion, right? Because it's really strange that some of those terrorists have been captured, but none has been tried. All have been liberated, freed, and so it's a bit weird what happened there. Anyhow, so have been total Ceausescu kind of killed until he was in power about I would say about 200 people, wounded several hundreds. And after he fled with the helicopter, there have been another 700 or so killed and 1 or 2,000 wounded by bullets in those street fights with those so-called terrorists. All this to say that this was the experience. Maybe, funnily enough, yeah, I do have a few more minutes. Funnily enough, I can tell you, just as a teenager, so remember, you've seen my other videos, perhaps, so you know that we were missing a lot of things in that dictatorship. Food from everything, basically, that would be call it modern or Western product. Um, that day, 22nd December, when we knew that Ceausescu did run away, my thoughts about that moment, on top of that, so I was telling you about that excitement, that joy, that craziness, but that joy also, part of it was because I was thinking, again, teenager thinking here, but also someone in a really dictatorship and poor communist country. I was thinking that the next day, maybe not the next day, but let's say at least the next week, we are going to have all the good Western things, all the, by my standards back then, chocolates, um, handheld games. Perhaps you can, if you know, if you are older, you know what the handheld games was. All electronic watches, everything is going to arrive in Romania, and it's going to be like all of a sudden we just stepped into Western Germany or United States or something like this, and we are going to have everything. And that was far from the truth. The country, the whole history, what happened with the economy of the country, actually, those who took over the country, basically, they stole the entire economy. They they sold it to foreign countries. The foreign countries did rob Romania, did take advantage of the country, did take things from there, did make contracts. They corporations came and exploited the resources. Basically, it's nothing new in there. That's pretty much what capitalist countries are doing in poor countries around the world, Africa, Asia, everywhere. So that was a takeover. Actually, they tossed Ceausescu and his regime, his dictatorship, and they basically did take advantage of the resources of the country. Basically, that's what happened. Both the Western countries, the rich one, including the European Union ones, and the people inside the country, which took control in politics and in the economy and various state institutions. So the economy didn't go well, pretty much like Russia as well. The economy went terribly bad. People were so the people were so happy, were so optimistic in the when Ceausescu ran away, but then they came back to the grim reality of life, and there have been a lot of unemployment, really bad economy, really difficult life, especially 5-10 years. So now it's getting slightly better, but there's incredible corruption in the politics, and yeah, the situation is better. Obviously, it is a completely different life, but the economy is not well, and especially the older persons who had these retirements, which are really low, they are really struggling a lot, and so anyhow, that's a completely different story. But that's how it ended, and. I just perhaps can tell you something that the basically what who has been punished, right? We would expect if Ceausescu had been overthrown to have people who were guilty for 45 years of communism, right? For such abuse, such basically like reporting to the number of abusers of the people who were part of this regime, basically none. They did kill Ceausescu's wife. His one of his children, who was more involved into politics with his father, has been punished, put to prison, and so on. Ceausescu had three children, two boys, one girl. The other boy and the girl were really not really supporting their father, so they have been kind of let go. They have punished four high end top nomenclature guys. They punished them with prison and so on. Couple of those, but most of those who actually um, did did pass the order, because Ceausescu did order to shut the crowd, right? Though there are persons these days who say it's not true because they are supporting him now, but that's not true. There's recording in like voice recordings of him giving orders, although he knew how to talk, not to say openly, shut them down. But he said, use military munition and just make quietness, right? So quiet them down, the protesters. So the Ceausescu did order, obviously, and that was all his order to shot people. So anyhow, all this to say that he wasn't the one who shot, right? So there have been many hundreds of people, of thousands who gave orders, who kept the weapons and so on, who shot into the crowd. Most of these have never been even tried. So they just went back home happily, and many of these actually got advanced. Many were in the military, became generals, got really thick, big pays, and so on. So just that's how it's all overthrown. Basically, was only meant to toast Ceausescu and just take over the country, but because the army and the security, basically the chief of the Securitate, which is the political police, were involved into the overthrow. They have been slightly, just a little bit punished and then just let go. And all the oppressive police, everybody that was part of this dictatorship, vast majority have just they just went back home, nothing happened to them, and again many of them actually got a rise and were doing very, very well. So that was insulting, I think, somehow, at least from the justice point of view. But that was the deal, to overthrow Ceausescu. Right? So that was my experience. That was the end of this dictatorship. And again, I just finished this and um, uh, have a few minutes. All this to say that it's what's happening now in North Korea. North Korea, I believe, it's worse than Romania in any aspects, in any point of view. More repression, more fear, more lacking things, more restrictions. Um, so keep this in mind. Just have a thought for those people, what they are going through. Millions of them. It's really painful, really difficult. Cuba is slightly better, maybe better weather, but they are still in difficult conditions and you also have Vietnam, I think, is more open market with capitalism, but it's still difficult in their communist country at this moment in 2025. So that was if you want, an experience of dictatorship, harsh dictatorship, but also lacking a lot of things, no freedom, no moving out of the country, no having goods. And then the change to, if you want, sort of a freedom, democracy that happened and that I did live and could just tell you about it. It's quite an experience, right? It's not something that everybody can understand what it is, does understand easily, but it's an interesting experience of life, I think. Maybe, hopefully, if I can record more, I can tell you something. Perhaps that may sound strange. Is that a good part of the communist dictatorship that I lived through is that people were somehow, yes, they were more, mm, I don't know, life was more difficult, but at the same time, because we didn't have this much, didn't enjoy many things. I think people were also more simple. They were not rich people like, bragging around with things. They were rich people in the nomenclature, guys, but we didn't see those people. Majority of population was about more or less the same level of life, more or less. So people were more simple, and somehow I think the people were just more natural back then, right? I think modernity and all this, whatever you call this, entertainment of any kinds, goods, TVs, cars, trips, whatever you can have in the Western society, Western world, capitalism, this kind of make humans, like globally speaking, just be less natural, more cold as well between them. They will help each other less. So when you have a harsh life, like in a dictatorship, yes, there are downsides, but it also kind of, at least on some persons, may also kind of keep you more human, more the way you are. So that may be a good side of that dictatorship part, if there can be any good part in the dictatorship. Thanks for watching.